imagine all of the clothes in the UK that we don't want. Why do we think that people overseas are going to want them? You know, and once it gets there, maybe some get repurposed, some get upcycled, some get resold in local second-hand markets. But even those second-hand markets actually destroy the local traditional textiles industry because there's so much stock that comes in at a very low price, so people just tend to buy second-hand now in the local markets. But then when it doesn't get sold, where does it go? And it just keeps coming. Like if we talk about Ghana, for example, receives millions and millions of items every single week. So it's like, where's it all going to go? And it ends up just accumulating in the seashores or it ends up in landfills, in essence. So that is, and in terms of like the environmental impact you have, so if you, let's think about it this way. If the beach is covered in clothes, obviously some of it is going to go into the waterways. So then that compromises sea life. Then when it comes to like clothes accumulating in landfills, they do release carbon emissions, specifically methane, which is one of the most damaging forms of gases that can go into the atmosphere. So yeah, all of that then means that one, there's the effect, the most obvious effect is global warming, which some deny that it exists, but it's there. Again, I mentioned it destroys the local sea life, but it also destroys the soil. And when it comes to the soil, we need to think about waterways, actually. And if your soil isn't good enough, then it compromises agriculture and the food industry. So there are so many other industries that are adjacent to fashion that can get affected by fast fashion, you know? So it has a repercussion on a lot of other people and, local environments.
100%. And I think even like when you're talking about like the wider impact, I know one thing we did with my undergraduate was one of my professors, he did his PhD on literally like textile dye waste in India and like how it was polluting like waterways. And yeah, literally like we said, like it was causing issues not just directly with like water sources, but also with the soil, crops were being affected, parts in certain places, like the soil could no longer be used for like agriculture because of the impact of this waste. But yeah, you also mentioned the garment workers themselves. So what is the impact on the garment workers as well?
So again, the easiest way to explain it would be if I want to make a T-shirt, and that T-shirt sells for £2, how much did I pay you for that T-shirt? And in that £2 is the cost of materials and is the cost of labour and my profit. How much did I pay you for that £2 T-shirt? How much are you getting paid per T-shirt?
Essentially, I'd be surprised if it's anything more than 50p is a stretch.
That's a good pay. Yeah, do you know, per item. Yeah. So that just gives you an idea of the level of exploitation that there is in this industry. And it isn't just in fast fashion, to be honest, it's the industry as a whole. Even luxury brands sometimes do produce in the Far East and then they finish the goods in Italy and then label it as made in Italy and stuff. Some do still manufacture in Europe, but manufacturing in Europe doesn't mean that it's more sustainable. Actually, there's still exploitation that happens in Europe, even in Leicester. You know, you have so many people that get smuggled here to work in factories, and because they're illegal, they don't get paid like a normal minimum wage, which is already low anyway. So imagine even less than that to survive on. So a lot of those people end up living in those factories with their families, whether it's with their little children and stuff. So there's that level of exploitation on the garment worker side, and it's just so complex. There's so much more that I could tell you about just that single issue, from like working hours, for example, because they get paid per unit, and because it's not a lot, and they have to pay rent to live in these factories in maybe rooms with like all of the other garment workers. So you can already think about how unsanitary, I can't remember what the word is. Unsanitary, it didn't come out naturally. You can think of how unsanitary that is, or how it compromises your health. Because if somebody has a cold and they're sleeping in a room with like 50 or 20 other people, we're all compromised now, do you know what I mean? So there's so much to it.